Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Randy and Neil both sent me this story, and every so often we hear rumblings about what's going to happen to cars in the future. Of course, the most obvious one is that they're going to stop selling internal combustion engine cars somewhere down the road. Some states have already picked dates, other states have not, but we know it's coming. And I've also heard things about speed limiters, some kind of governor for your car that will keep you from driving over a certain speed. And the most recent one is that the NTSB wants all new vehicles to check drivers for alcohol use. And the Associated Press ran the story. Tom Krischer wrote it. And the question is, how practical is this and how likely is it? The National Transportation Safety Board is recommending that all new vehicles in the U.S. be equipped with blood alcohol monitoring systems that can stop an intoxicated person from driving. The recommendation, if enacted by NHTSA, could reduce the number of alcohol-related crashes, one of the biggest causes of highway deaths in the U.S. Now, the story is actually kind of short on numbers, but the new push to make roads safer was included in a report released Tuesday about a horrific crash last year in which a drunk driver collided head-on with another vehicle near Fresno, California, killing both adult drivers and 7 children. So 9 people perished. NHTSA said this week that roadway deaths in the U.S. are at crisis levels. Nearly 43,000 people were killed last year, the greatest number in 16 years, as Americans returned to roads after pandemic stay-at-home orders. Now, you might say, Steve, you just said that the article is short on numbers, and you just read a whole bunch of numbers. Well, 43,000 fatalities. How many of those were alcohol-related? Early estimates show fatalities rising again through the first half of the year, but they declined from April through June, which authorities are hoping is a trend. Now, the NTSB has no actual regulatory authority, so they can't pass the rules, but they can ask other agencies to act, and so they're trying to put pressure on NHTSA to move on this topic, which could be effective as early as 3 years from now, they think. NTSB chairperson said, "We need NHTSA to act. We see the numbers. We need to make sure that we're doing all we can to save lives." Now, the NTSB, she said, has been pushing NHTSA to explore alcohol monitoring technology since 2012. So they've been thinking about this now for 10 years. The faster the technology is implemented, the more lives that will be saved, she said. The recommendation also calls for systems to monitor a driver's behavior, making sure they're alert. She said many cars now have cameras pointed at the driver, which have the potential to limit impaired driving. And I've heard of those kinds of sensors that can actually detect if the driver might be getting sleepy. But alcohol is another question. Now, the chairperson said she also understands that perfecting the alcohol test will take time. We also know it's going to take time for NHTSA to evaluate what technologies are available and how to develop a standard. Now, many people would know that there are devices they can put on cars that if you've got a problem with drinking and driving, they might say, we're not going to let you drive your car unless you install this device on it, which will actually lock you out of even starting the car unless you blow into, like, in essence, a built-in breathalyzer. And you got to blow into the breathalyzer, and it's got to be below a certain limit, obviously, and then the car can start. But they're not talking about going that full bore on this. A message was left Tuesday seeking comment from NHTSA. The agency and a group of 16 automakers have been jointly funding research on alcohol monitoring since 2008. I'm working on this now for 14 years, forming a group called Driver Alcohol Detection System for Safety, or DADS. Group has hired a Swedish company to research technology that would automatically test a driver's breath for alcohol and stop a vehicle from moving if the driver is impaired. That's according to Jake McCook, a spokesperson for the group. The driver wouldn't have to blow into a tube, and a sensor would check the driver's breath. Another company is working on light technology that could test for blood alcohol on a person's finger, he said. Breath technology could be ready by the end of 2024, while the touch technology would be about a year later, 2025. It could take 1 or 2 more model years after the automakers get the technology for it to be in new vehicles. Once the technology is ready, it'll take years for it to be in most of the roughly 280 million vehicles on U.S. roads. So obviously it goes into brand new vehicles. It won't go into the ones that are already in your driveway. And eventually it'll work its way into the system. And of course, it adds another complication to the car. So something malfunctions, you can't get the car to start. Is it because the car thinks you're drunk and you're not, and something's malfunctioning? Or is there something else wrong with one of the many onboard computers? Under last year's bipartisan infrastructure law, Congress required NHTSA to make automakers install alcohol monitoring systems within 3 years. The agency can seek an extension. In the past, it's been slow to enact such requirements. The legislation doesn't specify the technology, only that it must passively monitor a driver to determine if they're impaired. Now, in 2020, where the most recent numbers are available from, 11,000 people died in alcohol-related crashes, according to NHTSA. So that's 11,000 people in 1 year. That's about 30% of all U.S. traffic deaths, but it's also a 14% increase over 2019, the last full year before the coronavirus pandemic. And the question is, did the numbers go up because of the pandemic, or is it irrelevant? In the fatal crash included in the report, a 28-year-old driver of an SUV was headed home from a New Year's Day party where he had been drinking. The SUV went off the right side of State Route 33 and hit a Ford F-150 pickup truck head on. The pickup was carrying a parent and 7 children, aged 6 to 15, after a trip to Pismo Beach. The truck quickly caught fire and bystanders could not save the passengers, according to the NTSB. SUV's driver had blood alcohol at 0.21%, nearly 3 times California's legal limit. He also had marijuana in his system, but the agency said the alcohol is more than enough to severely impair his driving. SUV was traveling over 88 miles per hour, possibly as high as 98. Meanwhile, a man whose wife and 4 children were killed in the crash said he's happy the NTSB is pushing for alcohol monitoring because it could stop another person from losing loved ones. It's something that their families have to live with. It doesn't go away tomorrow. And a lawyer in this case says driver monitoring systems also could stop crashes caused by medical problems or drowsiness, saving anguish and billions in hospital treatment costs. So I'll be curious to see what technology they come up with and how intrusive it is, because they say it's going to be passive. Passive, meaning that you're not going to get in and do anything. It's going to somehow figure this out on its own. If that's possible, that's interesting. Of course, it will drive up the cost of the vehicles. And like I said, it adds another level of something that can malfunction, causing your car to not run. And then, of course, the third thing is that it won't be in all cars for some time, if ever, because there's always going to be cars that predate that on the road. And unfortunately, the people who drink a lot know that they drink a lot and would go, you know something, I could buy one of those cars with that technology, or I could buy one without it that's a year or two older. I'll go with the older car just in case. I don't like that kind of intrusion from Big Brother, perhaps. So we'll see what happens. But it's interesting. I'll believe it when I see it, and I'll look into it then to see if I agree with it. Tom Krischer wrote this for the Associated Press. Randy and Neil both sent it. NTSB wants all new vehicles to check drivers for alcohol use. Coming soon to a car near you. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. They're sure housework won't kill you, but why take the risk?